You won't believe this. The retired emperor just dropped a bomb. He says his son isn't even royal, and now he wants me, his favorite concubine, to bear him an heir. Yeah, you heard that right. I'm supposed to play midwife for palace politics. Buckle up, this is going to get messy. Only after the Emperor Emeritus abdicated did he discover that the reigning emperor was not his biological child. So he came to me, the noble consort, and said, "To be frank with you, the general is my illegitimate son. For the sake of the imperial bloodline, go and have a child with him." I was completely stunned. Wait, this is actually an option? Did people in your generation really play this wild? 1. My name is Jiang Zhi, the noble consort exclusively favored by His Majesty. Even before I entered the palace, His Majesty warned me that the Emperor Emeritus was a bit unhinged and told me to be patient with him. But I never imagined he could be this unhinged. Like right now, this little old man was grinning obsequiously, asking me to do him a small favor. The moment he opened his mouth, it was a bombshell. To be honest, Yun'er is not my biological child. Fortunately, General Pei is my illegitimate son. For the sake of the imperial bloodline, go and bear him a child. When the Emperor Emeritus was on the throne, his offspring were few. He had only one child, His Majesty, whom he raised like a priceless treasure. No amount of love ever felt like enough. He wanted to give Yun'er everything best in the world, including the throne itself. The trouble only started after he abdicated. That was when he discovered that the palace intrigues among the consorts back in his day had been so vicious that the baby had been switched long ago. Even so, the Emperor Emeritus had personally raised His Majesty from infancy. There was real affection there. And if word ever got out that His Majesty was not of imperial blood, those regional princes who had been eyeing the throne would have a perfectly legitimate excuse to rebel. So, for the sake of his beloved adopted child, and for the stability of the realm, the Emperor Emeritus came up with what he considered a brilliant solution. Have me, the noble consort, bear a child for his illegitimate son. That way, in terms of both status and bloodline, everything would line up perfectly. The Emperor Emeritus was so impressed with his own genius that he was practically drunk on it. His eyes narrowed with delight, his beard practically twitching upward as he slapped the table. As the saying goes, change the generation but not the lineage. Same soup, different bowl. Brilliant. Brilliant for him. For me, I was completely doomed. Because this General Pei was no stranger to me. He was the man I'd once had a fling with before entering the palace. Calling him a lover isn't quite accurate. To be precise, he was more like a fish I'd deliberately lured, then not only cut off the bait, but hauled him out, slapped him twice, and tossed him back into the water. Faced with the Emperor Emeritus's utterly outrageous request, I kept a polite smile on my face and agreed. But the moment I turned around, I went straight to lay everything out for His Majesty. After all, she is my direct superior. How close are we, exactly? Close enough that she'd risk her life for me, and I'd risk mine to fix things for her right back. We're the kind of sisters who wear the same pair of pants. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. I mean it literally. The Emperor Emeritus may not know this yet, but the current emperor, Xuan Yun, has more secrets than a beehive. Not only is she not a crown prince, she isn't even a man. She is, without a doubt, a woman. After hearing the Emperor Emeritus's grand vision from me, Xuan Yun fell silent for a moment, then suddenly looked enlightened. You're right. Why didn't I think of such a good idea? Thanks to how absurdly chaotic the previous generation's choices were, Xuan Yun's reign started on nightmare mode. Her identity was fake, her gender was reversed, her authority was fragmented, the ministers were unruly, and the regional princes were all ready to rebel at the drop of a hat. She had used me as an excuse to leave the inner palace effectively empty for 3 years, with no heir to show for it. The ministers kept pressing harder, and the princes across the land were already itching to move. Of course, given our situation, no matter how hard we tried, there was no way we could produce a child. So, in a way, the Emperor Emeritus's proposal really was the optimal solution. I swallowed hard, staring at her like she'd lost her mind. You're serious? Logically, It made sense, but the execution difficulty was sky-high. I kindly reminded her, "Have you forgotten? 3 years ago, for your sake, I practically left him dangling in midair. The moment you ascended the throne, I rushed straight into the palace to become your noble consort. That's when he left heartbroken for the borderlands. If you told me earlier, I could have just married him back then and sent the kid into the palace for you later. Wouldn't that have been easier?" Xuan Yun looked just as miserable. How was I supposed to know that old bastard had a past like that? I didn't even know back then that Pei Jun was my half-brother with a different father and mother. You think she was having a breakdown? What about me? 3 years ago, I cheated him out of his feelings. 3 years later, I was supposed to change tactics and cheat him out of his body instead? I'd screwed him over so completely back then. If we ever met again, and he didn't kill me, that would already be a miracle. How was I supposed to do that with him? Xuan Yun completely snapped. So, what if you reel him in one more time? Just think of it as doing this for me. The two of you can have a child. I laughed in anger. What was this now, imperial-sanctioned adultery? 2. The Emperor Emeritus was astonishingly efficient. On the third day after proposing his imperial decree, sanctioned a fair master plan to me, he had Pei Jun summoned back to the capital. It was obvious the old man had prepared everything in advance and only informed me at the very last minute. Pei Jun still didn't know the truth about his origins. Of course, neither the Emperor Emeritus nor Xuan Yun had any intention of letting him find out. I once asked why it had to be me using seduction instead of simply coming clean. Why not just lay everything out for Pei Jun and treat it as the two of us sacrificing ourselves for the country? Xuan Yun didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked me a question. If you were Pei Jun and you learned who you really were, would you obediently accept being a hidden tool who could never see the light of day? Or would you think that, since heaven itself had chosen you, you might as well rise up, rebel, and take back everything that should have been yours? I was silent for a long time before admitting. You know me, I've never really had much of a moral bottom line. But I feel like Pei Jun would at least have some. Xuan Yun was visibly shaken. Jiang Zhi, you've changed. You actually believe in men now. That question only made me feel more guilty toward Pei Jun. I snapped back. Nonsense. I've never been fooled by men. I'm the one who fooled them. The real issue is whether Pei Jun, after being tricked by me that badly, would ever trust a woman again, especially when that woman is me. Xuan Yun had some inexplicable level of confidence. She patted my shoulder and said reassuringly, "Relax. You're his natural counter. Every major stumble he's had in his life has been because of you. For everything else, he learns from his mistakes. But when it comes to you, he just keeps falling into the same pit again and again until one day he decides the pit actually tastes pretty good." I crouched down, covered my face, and let out a wail. "Don't say that. You're just making me feel even more guilty." I saw Pei Jun again at the welcome banquet the Emperor Emeritus held for him. It was called a banquet, but not many people were invited. After all, the Emperor Emeritus had ulterior motives and too many eyes would have been inconvenient. I had a guilty conscience myself, so I couldn't stop looking at Pei Jun. He didn't flusteredly avoid my gaze, nor did he pretend not to see me. Instead, he nodded at me calmly and respectfully, then offered a perfectly measured, distant smile. He looked like someone who had let go of the past and reached total emotional detachment, which only made me even more at a loss. Over the past few years, I'd imagined our reunion 1,000 times. In my ideal version, it would be a fleeting accidental encounter. He wouldn't say a word, my eyes would redden, and we'd pass by each other, never to meet again, each returning to dust. In my imagination, we were supposed to be Liang Shanbua and Zhu Yingtai. I never expected that when we met again, it would be more like Shimin Qing and Pan Jinlian. I cast a resentful glance at the person beside me, Wu Dalong, no, wait, His Majesty, and felt a wave of complicated emotion surge up inside me. Since ancient times, love has always hurt most at parting. And now of all times, damn you, Xuan Yun. How are you ever going to repay what you owe me? When the Emperor Emeritus tried to force-feed Pei Jun alcohol for the 17th time, Xuan Yun finally stepped in. Using Pei Jun's low tolerance as an excuse, she graciously allowed him to stay overnight in the palace. Pei Jun had just excused himself to change clothes when, under the tacit approval and deliberate leniency of both the Emperor Emeritus and Xuan Yun, I followed after him. I intercepted him along the only path he could take. "General Pei," I said softly, "I've had too much to drink today as well, and I seem to have lost my way. Pei Jun, would you be willing to guide me and walk with me for a while?" I used to do this all the time. Whenever I wanted to get close to him, I couldn't even be bothered to come up with a decent excuse. Truthfully, I just liked watching him indulge me helplessly, fully aware that I was lying. That trick had always worked before. But now, it didn't work at all. Pei Jun gave me a formal salute without sparing me even a shred of a sideways glance. "Noble consort, this humble general has been away from the capital for many years and likely doesn't recognize the roads either. Please wait here, Your Grace. I'll fetch a palace attendant." 3 people had already cast a net to catch this one fish. There was no way he'd find anyone. Just as he was about to leave, I let out an "ah" and twisted my ankle. He did stop, but kept a distance of 3 steps, as if assessing whether I was faking it. When I looked up, my eyes were filled with tears. I didn't know whether it was from the pain or from sadness. "Pei Jun, have you been well?" It was so soft I almost doubted he'd answered at all. After that came long stretches of silence. I stayed there, tears brimming, maintaining a pitiful, fragile posture. In the end, I couldn't hold it in anymore. Why don't you ask how I've been?" Pei Jun finally turned his head. He forced an extremely strange smile. "How well Your Grace has been living, this humble general has heard a thing or two. After all, though the borderlands are far away, there's still a storyteller or two who help pass the time." The moment he mentioned storytellers, I understood exactly what he'd heard. Young love first blooms, the emperor and consort entwined in cloud and rain, hearts heavy with the fate of the realm. The censor overhears the bedchamber at midnight. That lurid, melodramatic story about me and Xuan Yun, the one the storytellers loved so much, was something I had written myself. Who knew it could travel this far? What a sin. 3. The reason I became noble consort 3 years ago was simple. I was afraid that once Xuan Yun's harem filled up with concubines, not only would it waste innocent girls' youth, but her secret as a woman would sooner or later be exposed. So, we urgently needed someone who knew everything inside out to seize the top position in the harem as fast as possible, fill the vacancy, and leave no room for outsiders to interfere. With requirements like that, who but me? As one solid brick in the foundation of our friendship, I naturally went wherever I was needed. I threw myself wholeheartedly into the role of the jealous noble consort and worked at it nonstop for 3 years. Originally, with my family background, I barely but legitimately qualified to become empress. Unfortunately, some sharp-tongued censor submitted a memorial, claiming that although I was indeed from an official family, I had once fallen into servile status, which made me inherently lowborn. What's more, before being acknowledged by the Jiang family, I had served at His Majesty's side as a personal attendant. A lone man and a lone woman together day and night. Who knew when I might have already lost my chastity? Otherwise, how could I be so seductive as to charm His Majesty into leaving the 6 palaces empty just for me? I never expected those censors, who prided themselves on moral purity, to harbor such filthy thoughts, using a woman's chastity as their favorite weapon. All those books they read clearly went straight into a dog's stomach. I wasn't angry. I simply stayed up all night and wrote a storybook. The very next day, every storyteller in the capital rolled out a new chapter. First bloom of desire. Emperor and consort united in cloud and rain, hearts heavy with the state. A censor eavesdrops at midnight. I don't like proving myself innocent. I prefer watching others struggle to do it. And just like that, it was the loudmouth censor's turn to repeatedly explain to his colleagues, "I didn't. I never did. Don't make things up." I couldn't explain my innocence with Xuan Yun, just as he couldn't explain that he'd never listened outside our walls. I used to be immensely proud of that counterattack. I never imagined it would come back to bite me like this. Had I known those words would reach Pei Jun's ears, I would have written them with a little more restraint. Now I was so embarrassed, I practically wanted to crawl into a crack in the ground. Ahem, they're just rumors. How much of it can possibly be true? Since when do you believe this sort of thing? Pei Jun let out a soft chuckle and stepped closer, one step at a time. The smell of alcohol on him wasn't unpleasant. Paired with the faint moisture in his eyes, he was like 2 full jars of wine, enough to lure someone into getting hopelessly drunk. If he'd smiled at me like this 3 years ago, I would have been so happy I couldn't sleep all night. Now, it only made my skin crawl. He looked straight into my eyes, his voice tinged with something hypnotic. So, Your Grace means that life hasn't been going well lately, and that's why you've been reminiscing about the past, unable to help yourself? That was what I meant, but did you really have to say it so bluntly? Do I have no dignity left at all? I nodded messily, not daring to look at him, my face burning red. Suddenly, Pei Jun grabbed my wrist and demanded through clenched teeth. Jiang Zhi, am I really someone you can summon at will and discard just as easily? Do you think you're that clever? You weren't smart, I was just stupid. But I can't keep being this stupid forever, can I? At this point, Pei Jun truly wasn't stupid anymore, because he'd gone completely insane. He went straight to Xuan Yun and asked her to dismiss everyone else. Then he laid out, word for word, everything that had just happened between us, repeating it all exactly as it was. He played so far outside the expected script that I was struck completely speechless. I had to admit, his greatest virtues had always been loyalty and honesty. As if he could hear my thoughts, he spoke again, practically begging for death. According to the laws of Great Chu, I ask your majesty to pass judgment. Please sentence the subject and the noble consort to death. I was utterly dumbfounded. I just wanted to sneak around with you. How did this turn into a suicide pact? 4. Xuan Yun was stunned too. She clearly hadn't expected this lunatic to go for a self-destruct that came with a buy-one-get-one-free deal. Time and distance really do beautify everything. After 3 years, I only remembered him as a pure-hearted young man, and forgot that he'd evolved into a pure-hearted madman. Pei Jun, you really are something else. Turns out I was right to dump you back then. So, here was the problem. How was Xuan Yun supposed to deal with the two of us? If she really had us executed, she'd basically be burying herself along with me and Pei Jun for the rest of her life. But if she did nothing at all, then in Pei Jun's eyes, Xuan Yun would be the greenest, most luxuriantly horned turtle in the Imperial Garden Pond. Xuan Yun was silent for a long while, then suddenly let out a relieved laugh. So hard her face turned red. The moment her face flushed, mine turned pale. Because I knew full well that whenever she looked like this, she definitely wasn't holding in anything good. Even though Xuan Yun wasn't the Emperor Emeritus's biological child, when it came to being unreliable, the two of them were absolutely cut from the same cloth. Minister Pei truly is sincere and loyal, she said warmly. Congratulations, you've passed the test set by myself and the noble consort. Back then, I saw everything between you and the noble consort clearly. From today onward, I will harbor no further suspicions toward either of you. Pei Jun froze in place. After a long while, he slowly lifted his head and looked at me, letting out a self-mocking smile. A test? The noble consort and his majesty truly have refined tastes. I was the only one who took it seriously all along. Judging by his expression, he probably thought he'd become nothing more than a disposable prop in some flirtatious little game between husband and wife. No, brother. I'll admit I meant to use you, but not like that. After Pei Jun withdrew without another word, Xuan Yun wiped sweat from her forehead. I was honestly afraid we'd push this honest man too far, and he'd just stab us both and skewer us like kebabs. At that moment, my eyes were wider than an ox's. I wanted nothing more than to poke a finger straight into Xuan Yun's head. The Emperor testing her own noble consort with a general? Listen to yourself. Does that sound reasonable? I don't even dare imagine what kind of person I look like to him now. Xuan Yun looked as bitter as a bitter melon. Then what else was I supposed to do? If you can come up with a better excuse, I'll throw away what little dignity I have left and chase him down right now to explain it myself. While I was still trying to figure out how to salvage the situation, Xuan Yun started wavering. He really wanted to die with you just now. Then maybe we should drop it. I can't sacrifice you just for a child. What if he turns love into hatred and ends up hurting you? He wouldn't, I said quietly, lowering my head. Guilt and self-loathing peaked all at once. He's a good person. Back then, and now. I've just been taking advantage of the fact that he's good. From Pei Jun's perspective, I was a femme fatale who first toyed with his feelings, then latched onto power and kicked him aside, an evil consort who brought ruin to the state. He'd been gone for 3 years, and hated me for 3 years. And now that he was back, he discovered that I still wanted to keep playing with him. Given everything I'd done, the cruelest thing he could think of wasn't verbal humiliation, physical harm, or emotional revenge. It was the law of Great Chu. Not only punishing me, but dragging himself down with me. Pei Jun might be mad, but compared to those deranged storybook characters who gouge out eyes and rip out hearts at the drop of a hat, he was almost righteous to the point of madness. Xuan Yun was still uneasy. If it really won't work, forget it. I'm sure I can come up with another solution. The mess left by the previous generation shouldn't always be yours to clean up. I rejected her suggestion. Because I knew better than anyone. If Xuan Yun could have found another way, we wouldn't have been stuck like this for 3 years. The key to resolving this mess wasn't me, it was Pei Jun. After all, he was the Emperor Emeritus's only true blood relative. Handling the court could rely on imperial strategy. Defending against foreign threats required a general to guard the borders. But to temporarily quell the rebellious thoughts of those regional princes? That really could only be done through my womb as noble consort. Early the next morning, I pulled myself together and brought a box of plain porridge and simple dishes I'd made myself to the palace hall where Pei Jun was staying. Ignoring the gaze so cold it seemed to drip water, I continued acting out the lines I'd memorized the night before. You drank a lot yesterday. Eat something light. Your stomach will feel better. In the past, whenever I'd done something especially awful, I'd act considerate the next day, then sell myself as pitiful to make peace with him. Only now did I realize that those little tricks I thought were foolproof had only worked because he deliberately indulged me. So today, my visit was less about seduction and more about a gamble. I was betting that he still liked me. Seeing there was no one behind me, Pei Jun understood that I still hadn't given up. He didn't chase me away or say anything. He simply set out the food I'd brought, sat across from me, and ate quietly 1 bite at a time. After that, he sat silently for a while longer, eyes closed, as if waiting for something. When whatever he expected failed to happen, he opened his eyes and looked at me, his tone oddly unexpected. I thought His Majesty was still wary of the two of us, so you came today to kill me. Turns out I overestimated you. Murder is something you still can't bring yourself to do. So he thought I'd poison the food? And here he was, eyes closed just now, waiting to die? What kind of deranged mental circuitry was this? Did he have zero survival instinct? I was so shocked I didn't know how to respond. To prove there was absolutely no poison, I grabbed his porridge bowl and took a huge gulp. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. I smashed the bowl and started yelling at him. Are you out of your mind? You thought I was going to kill you, and you just let me? Pei Jun, you're the craziest, stupidest person I've ever met. How little do you value your own life? Watching me lose my temper, Pei Jun actually smiled. The noble consort acts so convincingly. Anyone who didn't know better would think you truly cared about me. So, why this performance today? Is His Majesty still suspicious? Or did Your Grace simply not get enough fun yesterday? Pei Jun, I regret it. Since we'd met again, this was the only thing I truly meant. Back then, it was Prince An's people who drugged Xuan Yun. I was accidentally dragged into it, and that's how everything that followed happened. But I never loved His Majesty, and I never forgot you. I left out the secret of Xuan Yun's true gender and told him only the truth of what had happened back then.
5.
The The story really begins about 4 years ago, when the Emperor Emeritus was still the reigning emperor. He fell gravely ill, nearly to the point of death. Xuan Yun's uncles, those princes eyeing the throne, immediately became alert and started making moves. One by one, they returned from their fiefdoms to the capital under the pretext of tending to the sick emperor. Among them, the emperor's own brother, Prince Sin, was the most active. He practically came straight with the aim of seizing the throne, loud, arrogant, and completely disregarding Crown Prince Xuan Yun. He worked to rally court ministers, win public support, and even tried to betroth his daughter to Pei Jun. The Pei family's position was unique. The elder Pei defended the battlefield. The younger Pei maintained order inside the palace. In other words, if Prince Sin could secure the Pei family's allegiance, and considering he himself was a legitimate heir, then once the Emperor Emeritus passed away, controlling Xuan Yun would be effortless. At that time, I had just been acknowledged by the Jiang family and was officially Miss Jiang, the legitimate eldest daughter. Whether it was because I'd been dazzled by Pei Jun's handsome face, or because I felt an overwhelming sisterly loyalty to Xuan Yun, I stepped forward decisively. What's there to fear? He has a daughter, and you have me. I'll take Pei Jun down for you. If I married Pei Jun, it would mean binding both my father and Pei Jun firmly to Xuan Yun's side. I thought at the time, marrying Pei Jun would both repay a debt of gratitude and satisfy my own selfish desires.
Double win.
Looking back, it's clear that when I clung to him back then, I didn't lack genuine feelings. But they were only half of the story. Half desire, half lust, and the remaining 9 parts purely strategic. Again, I had to admit, I really was not human. That was how I entangled Pei Jun. At that time, I used every trick in the book, relentless pursuit, shameless persistence, to win him over. Because of my interference, Prince Sin failed to marry his daughter to Pei Jun. And as luck would have it, the emperor began to recover. The first thing he did after getting better was to abdicate in favor of Xuan Yun. No matter how twisted the process, the ultimate goal was achieved. I was just contemplating whether to continue seducing Pei Jun or quietly step back when fate made the decision for me. After Xuan Yun became emperor, the harem was immediately under scrutiny. She accidentally got drugged, and I stopped her just before the moment she would have been violated. I knocked her out and spent the entire night with her. At dawn, the rumors about the Emperor and Miss Jiang's night of passion spread throughout the capital. So when those censors claimed I had deliberately seduced His Majesty before entering the palace, it wasn't entirely baseless. At least in what they saw, that was the truth. Afterward, I became noble consort, and Pei Jun followed his father to the borderlands. I had thought we would never meet again, or if we did, we'd have forgotten each other entirely. Who could have guessed that the Emperor Emeritus would drop such a massive bomb, instantly throwing Pei Jun and me back into this battlefield of emotions?
6.
Pei Jun, I know it's wrong of me to say all this, but I just like you and I just want to see you. I did before and I still do now, nothing more. If you never want to see me again, I won't appear in front of you anymore. After saying this, my tears hovered on the brink of falling, and I turned to leave. I walked slowly, every step shouting in my heart, "No, wait. You can't leave me. I beg you, just stay with me." Jiang Zhi, he finally called after me. I forced myself to suppress my joy, only to see his face twisted with restrained anger, mixed with resentment and grievance. Why should I go along just because you like me? Why should I betray myself just because you regret it? Jiang Zhi, what exactly am I to you? A pawn to use when convenient? Or a toy for your loneliness? 3 years apart had changed Pei Jun. Not only had he gone slightly mad, he'd matured. He saw through my deliberate push and pull, knew I was after his body, and tore through my pretense with laser precision. The red at the corners of his eyes was, admittedly, tempting, but seeing him so hurt, there was no trace of desire in me. He looked at me with a mix of despair and sarcasm. Why not just tell me straight? Do you want to satisfy a fleeting desire, make up for past regrets, or just enjoy seeing me completely lost, spinning helplessly under your control? I hesitated, thinking a single fleeting night wouldn't be enough. At minimum, it would take several nights to achieve my purpose. But judging from his words, he clearly wanted to cut ties with me as soon as possible. Forget multiple nights, he wanted nothing to do with me at all. I gave up pretending and decided to provoke him. Yes, I'm using you. Yes, I'm toying with you. I'm restless, and in your eyes, I'm the worst, most terrible person. But what can you do about it? I think about you, I like you, I want to seduce you. If I set my sights on you, tough luck. It's your misfortune. Pei Jun didn't reply, but his face turned bright red, probably from anger. This time it wasn't manipulation. I really left, and quickly. I went straight to Xuan Yun's bedchamber, collapsed on the table, and wailed. It's over. We've completely fallen apart. You figure it out. If you have the ability, you too can have a child, I wouldn't object. Your own child, now that would be a legitimate heir. Xuan Yun sighed, asking me, are you sure he doesn't like you anymore? I shook my head. Not sure. But I am sure he hates me to death. Xuan Yun looked at me again. Then, do you still like him? Had she not asked, I might have spared my pride. But now I wailed even louder, no tears coming, avoiding the question. Is he even human? 3 years at the border. Wind, sun, rain, and somehow he keeps getting better looking? With zero experience in romance, Xuan Yun now acted like a seasoned matchmaker. Meeting your beloved, you straighten your clothes. How could he not look good? I heard that the night he returned to the palace, exhausted, he changed clothes 8 times. Jiang Zhi, did you notice you spent at least half an hour longer on your makeup yesterday than usual? We've been poking and teasing each other for ages, and I shot back. With your position, it's unlikely you'll ever have a partner. Why study romance so thoroughly? Just to play the spectator, right? The moment I said it, a wave of grief hit me. Because with my position, it's unlikely I'll ever have a partner either. And the saddest part? I'm still failing at stealing a romance. 7. I had thought that after our last conversation it was over between Pei Jun and me. Who would have thought that today he sneaked into the palace and arranged to meet me at dusk? Suddenly, it felt like our roles had reversed. Pei Jun, here I was planning to let you go, and yet you came to seduce me yourself. I strutted to our rendezvous, but only pretended to be sneaky when I arrived. After all, with the 2 biggest Buddhas of the palace backing me, even if I was having an affair, I could do it with absolute confidence. When we met, Pei Jun looked awkward. Before, I was always the one to make the first move after our arguments. I was thick-skinned and never cared. But he, proud and stubborn, was surely internally scolding himself for his own foolishness. He hesitated as he handed me a pill, his voice tense. This is a death-simulating potion. If you take it, in 3 days you'll appear dead, and not even the Imperial Medical Court could detect it. Since entering the palace wasn't your choice and you're unhappy here, I can take you away. I cut him off, suddenly feeling embarrassed to say it out loud. You might have misunderstood. I don't intend to elope with you. He had been rattling on about the potion, but froze when he heard that. His fingers tightened slightly, then he tried to act casual. Actually, I didn't really want to elope either. The potion wasn't something I specifically sought. It just happened to be there. I didn't put much thought into it. I also didn't expect you to go out afterward. The more he spoke, the more unguarded he became, until he finally blurted. Jiang Zhi, what exactly do you mean? You say you like me, yet you won't go with me. Do you want me to be your? Jiang Zhi, don't overestimate yourself. I don't like you as much as you think. My guilt hit me like a tidal wave. I could practically imagine how much he had tossed and turned, agonizing over the decision, constructing thousands of excuses just to convince himself. Why must the sins of the previous generation fall upon us? I was calming myself, about to apologize, even briefly considering telling him everything. But before I could speak, he pulled me behind a curtain. Someone was coming. We were in Chang'an Pavilion, a place generally deserted unless a theater troupe had been summoned to entertain the consorts. Soon, strange yelps and squeals reached our ears. We both recognized the voice. It was the Emperor Emeritus. Listening to him, I could almost picture him wiggling his fingers, straining his voice, awkwardly mimicking the gestures of a stage actor. For a moment, I felt a weird sympathy for those princes scheming for the throne. If it were me, losing the succession to this oddball, I'd be furious, lying awake at night, wondering, why him? By now, Pei Jun had probably been driven nearly insane by me. He leaned close to my ear, threatening. What would happen to us if we were caught? Perhaps His Majesty loves you immensely and would spare you, no matter what. But can the Emperor Emeritus be as merciful? I tried to cover his mouth, but he countered. We were so close, and in his eyes, there was no tenderness, only a vengeful satisfaction. He smiled beautifully, just like one evening 3 years ago. You kiss me once, and I won't call anyone.
3 years ago, I had said that to him.
Back then, I was half sincere, half teasing, cornering him in the artificial rock formations. The space was narrow. We were squeezed together. He couldn't even raise his hand to cover my mouth. Outside, the world was full of people. The more flustered he looked, the more I wanted to tease him. I lowered my voice. You kiss me once, and I won't call anyone. And with that, I couldn't stop laughing. People like him, even if a knife were at their throat, they definitely wouldn't. No one had told me that someone so quiet and reserved could also play the break the pot and throw it all away game.
8.
It was my first kiss with him, and honestly, it felt pretty good. But it came so unexpectedly that I inexplicably felt cheated. I wanted to cry a little, but forced myself to hold it in. After taking such a loss, and it being my own choice, I couldn't even feel entitled to tears. I could only curse myself for lacking restraint. How did I manage to push someone so far? Fate had flipped the script. 3 years later, now I was the one being threatened. But listening to the strange noises of the Emperor Emeritus outside, my anger flared, daring and bold. I shook my head at Pei Jun, looking defiant. I won't kiss. Call whoever you want. Pei Jun clearly didn't expect my reaction and froze. I tilted my head, further egging him on. Lift the curtain.
Come on, show me.
Finally, it was my turn to shock him. But I wanted more excitement. While he was still stunned, I stood on tiptoe, wrapped my arms around his neck, and kissed him. Then I clarified. This is my choice. Not your threat, not fear of you calling anyone. If the curtain had been pulled back now, the Emperor Emeritus would have seen us entwined, shamelessly embracing. My pale pink lipstick was still on Pei Jun's lips, impossible to deny. I didn't know which would embarrass the Emperor Emeritus more, being caught enjoying his private theatrics, or witnessing his daughter-in-law and another son having an affair. But Pei Jun was quick and stopped my hand, pulling me tightly into his arms. Perhaps my boldness sent him the wrong signal. He thought I was also willing to die with him, believed I truly loved him, and used that to lower his guard. He sighed softly, pressing against my ear. You're so afraid of pain. I don't want to die with you. Whatever you want, using me, teasing me. I'm the best choice. Jiang Zhi, I really hate you.
9.
Ever since that night in Chang'an Pavilion, Pei Jun seemed to have swung from one extreme to another. Before, he was cautious to the point of retreat, avoiding me entirely. Now, he tried every possible way just to see me, even for a moment. To give us some privacy, Xuan Yun allowed me to return to the Jiang household for a visit, and she specifically ordered Pei Jun to accompany me as a guard. Back in my former boudoir, Pei Jun removed my hairpins. We embraced and kissed, and then nothing happened? Because this stubborn man absolutely refused to go any further. He said that it would be outrageous, that coveting a consort was already a betrayal of his duties as a subject. If he also confused the royal bloodline, he could never forgive himself. He really was such a good boy, which only made me feel more like a shameless, scheming concubine. But I was a good child too. Where did he know? Everything I did was for the sake of preserving the royal bloodline. And more importantly, my lips were already swollen from kissing, and now he's telling me it's forbidden? I ground my teeth in frustration. You said it didn't matter what I did, now you pick and choose. What kind of amusement is this? Pei Jun's ears flushed red as he slowly removed his clothing, revealing defined lines and toned muscles. Then he took my hand and guided it toward his waist, and his breathing grew heavier as he coaxed me. Stop being angry. You can touch me. Does that count as amusement? I bit his shoulder hard. You scheming man who's amusing whom, huh? Pei Jun wasn't angry either. He laid me gently on the bed and kissed my eyes, his breath scorching. I've actually learned a few other things. Can you close your eyes? Don't look at me. I can't handle it. But no matter how I begged, Pei Jun didn't budge on his bottom line. Finally, when I pushed him to the limit, he pinned me to the bed, staring into my eyes. I'll ask you, if we truly had a child, what would you do with me? I can exist without title or status as your lover. That's my own fault. I deserve it. But I can't let the child bear this sin with me. Pei Jun didn't know his own identity, nor my true intentions, nor that a child between us would be the hope of the great Chu dynasty. All he knew instinctively was that he could not commit an act that would disrupt the royal court. But one thing he didn't misjudge: what would happen after the child is born? Where would Pei Jun and I go from there? Before, I had thought simply, the father stays, the son continues. But I couldn't bear to abandon Pei Jun again, let alone a life brought into the world by me. When I returned from the Jiang household to the palace, Xuan Yun was laughing so hard she could barely straighten her back. Pei Jun and that old fool, are they really father and son? One's wildly unreliable, the other extreme but dependable. I couldn't laugh. I was still pondering a question I had long avoided. If I truly had a child, what should I do with Pei Jun? So, I tossed the question to Xuan Yun, hoping to find some resolve. After all, she was the one who had started this whole mess. But she's always a master at testing resolve, so she asked me, Jiang Zhi, asking me won't help. Ask yourself, do you like him? This time I didn't dodge. Of course I do. If I didn't, would I be this conflicted? Xuan Yun propped up her arms, watching me leisurely. Then let me ask you, if I and Pei Jun both fell into the water, who would you save first? My head shook like a rattle. I honestly had no idea. She skipped that question and tried another. What if it's you who falls in, and Pei Jun and I are on the shore? Who would you reach for? This time, the first face that popped into my mind was Pei Jun's. But I'm stubborn, refusing to admit it. I'd scream for help and see who jumps first. Whoever jumps first gets a point. Whoever doesn't, I'll push them in when I get out. Being too familiar with someone is never good. Xuan Yun saw right through me. You're avoiding the answer because you already know it, and you're not telling me because the person you'd choose isn't me. She pulled me down to sit, like countless nights in childhood, talking heart to heart. You treat me well because you feel you owe me your life. You always feel the need to repay me, never able to refuse my requests. But Jiang Zhi, you are my friend, not my tool. I knew that, of course. But Xuan Yun had long ceased being just a benefactor to me. Precisely because we are friends, I cannot abandon you. Xuan Yun shook her head, then pressed further. As a friend, you've already done enough for me. Choosing your own happiness, even if you think it's abandoning me, that's unreasonable. Does my being alive stop you from being happy? I muttered, head down. You didn't say that before. You begged me to have a child with him, saying it would be for you. I slumped, and Xuan Yun, like she used to as a child, patted my head. That old fool asked you to bear a child for his illegitimate son because he's a moron. I'm not a moron. If not for his request, if not for my urging you, you'd never have been close to Pei Jun again. You'd have spent your life in the palace, a mere trophy for me. She held my hand, eyes full of determination and blessing. My last request, follow your heart. Doing so will repay every debt you owe me. I ask you, follow your own wishes. I was bewildered, instinctively touching my empty stomach, looking up with foolish hope. But what about the child? Xuan Yun tapped my forehead. You're silly. You're not the only one in the world with royal blood. My brain hadn't caught up. I had spent the last few days scheming to seduce Pei Jun, and now all I could think about was seducing him. You don't mean I'm supposed to seduce a royal relative and have a child myself, do you? Xuan Yun glanced at me, hopelessly exasperated. I've found the old fool a whole bunch of beauties lately. One of them can sing, his favorite. I hear he's secretly learning theater, trying to win her smile. So the continuation of the royal bloodline isn't just the emperor and the consort. It can also be ensured by the emperor emeritus and the dowager consort. Brilliant. But suddenly, I remembered the heavenly sound I'd heard from the emperor emeritus at Changyin Pavilion. I'm not sure that beauty will even manage to smile. Xuan Yun's scheming mind clicked into gear. The old fool is just over 40, still in his prime. Why not have him father a son for me? Wait, hold on. I'm confused. What exactly is everyone's generation here?
10.
Half a month later, palace servants brought news. The beauty Xuan Yun had presented to the Emperor Emeritus was pregnant. At the same time, His Majesty the Emperor announced to the entire realm that the consort was expecting. That night, I disguised myself and sneaked into the general's mansion. Pei Jun had just heard the news about the consort's pregnancy and was sulking, drowning his frustrations in wine. Seeing me, he froze completely, like a child caught in trouble. Jiang Zhi,
I'm sorry.
I thought. I didn't know it would. At that moment, I had no schemes in mind. He just looked so adorable that I teased him on purpose. Of course not, Pei Jun. This child isn't yours. Pei Jun froze, then crushed the cup in his hand, muttering to himself. That's right, you and His Majesty are husband and wife, of course. I interrupted again, playfully. Wrong again. This child isn't the Emperor's either.
What?
Pei Jun's eyes widened as if he were meeting me for the first time, then he lost his composure again. Right, I have no status. What right do I have to demand anything from you? Since you have me, it's natural you might have someone else. I can't provide, so naturally you'd seek someone who can. So this is the image I already held in his mind? Calmly, I dropped another bomb. This child belongs to the Emperor Emeritus. Pei Jun was shocked, stepping back 2 paces, finally realizing and murmured softly. Impossible. Jiang Zhi, you're not that kind of person. I stepped forward, selectively confessing. Of course I'm not that kind of person, because the child is mine. This child belongs to the Emperor and the consort. On the day he is born, that consort will die in childbirth. Once the consort dies in childbirth, Xuan Yun would stage a grand, heartfelt performance, posthumously honoring the consort as empress, maintaining her rank, never taking another consort, and raising the consort's child to adulthood. I once asked Xuan Yun what would happen if this child were a girl. She said, "It doesn't matter. I'm a woman myself, and my life is long. I have plenty of time. If it's truly a daughter, I will dedicate my entire life to clearing every obstacle for her, so she may become a rightful empress. There will never be another Xuan Yun in this world." I explained my relationship with the emperor to Pei Jun, but still didn't reveal that Xuan Yun was a woman. Not because I didn't trust him, but because the more people who knew this secret, the more dangerous it became. As for why the emperor would bear a child through a surrogate, my reason to Pei Jun was simple. The emperor is incapable. Absolutely incapable. Pei Jun's voice was now cautious. And after that? After the consort passes, where will you go? I cleared my throat and pretended to think hard. I think someone once invited me to elope. Maybe I should accept? Who was that again? Why can't I remember? But the person in front of me was not ecstatic as I imagined. Instead, he clutched me, still panicking, demanding repeatedly. Jiang Zhi, last time, I'll trust you one final time. You cannot lie to me. You promise me you cannot lie, and if you could lie to me for life, then even that would be acceptable. 9 months later, the consort died exhausted in childbirth. Xuan Yun's plan came true. It really was a girl. Xuan Yun adored her, naming her Xuyang. She spent her days holding Xuyang, grinning ear to ear. Little one, sleep peacefully. Watch as your mother outwits the world on your behalf. After the funeral for filial, upright, gentle, virtuous, and benevolent Empress Zhang, I could finally retire with honor, taking several boxes of gold, silver, and jewels given by Xuan Yun away from the capital. These were originally burial goods for the Empress, but since I wasn't dead, there was no burial to accompany. And don't ask why the posthumous title was so long. Xuan Yun said, a person dies only once in their life, so it had to be done grandly. Pei Jun and I settled at the frontier. No one there knew me, so I asked him. The consort is dead, so who am I now? Pei Jun held me from behind, resting his chin on my shoulder, counting off each detail with me. You are the emperor's adopted sister, called Jiang Zhi. You are 20, born in the year of the rabbit. Tomorrow is your birthday. You want gold, silver notes, and a bouquet of flowers. Your favorite food is chestnut cake. And your favorite person is Pei Jun. All right, completely correct. Xuan Yun's side story. 5 years after the death of the filial, upright, gentle, virtuous, and benevolent Empress Zhang, the emperor found a substitute and brought her into the palace, still granting her the title of consort. However, the old attendants who had served the previous consort were baffled. The former consort had been petite and delicate. This new consort was 8 feet tall. The former consort's voice was soft and melodious. This one's was deep and resonant. The former consort's body was frail. This one could take on 8 people at once. How is this substitute even remotely similar? They unanimously concluded. The emperor must have cried too hard back then and damaged his eyes from it. Indeed, I am the emperor with the eye disease. But if you call me empress, I'd be even happier. Yes, I am a woman. I am the emperor, but not an empress regnant. To die without ever being recognized as an empress regnant remains one of my greatest regrets. But there is a comfort. The one who saw me off in death was an empress regnant, and she was trained entirely by me. Applause. My own birth was rather unusual. My mother was already pregnant before entering the palace, and I was not my father's child. She tried desperately not to give birth to me, wandering around clutching her belly, intentionally provoking others. This reckless behavior actually intimidated the other consorts who were eyeing the throne. They assumed my mother had tricks up her sleeve and dared not make a move, fearing they would take the fall. Later, as her time approached, my mother couldn't bear it anymore. She thought that if all else failed, she could give birth to me, send me out of the palace, and tell the emperor she had borne a prince, but the little prince tragically died. Yes, she had to tell him it was a prince. That way, even if the prince died at birth, she would still be recognized as the mother of the emperor's eldest son. Back then, my mother was young and underestimated the power of maternal love. When I was born, seeing me, she could not bear to let me go. She thought, it's just a daughter. She can't take anything from the old Xian family. Might as well keep her. But she got so absorbed in me that she forgot to instruct the midwife to correct her words. When the midwife loudly proclaimed a prince, my mother woke from her daze. Once someone lowers their standards, the bar only keeps sinking. She thought, even if the child holds the title of eldest son, what's the harm? At worst, the child would just keep a low profile, not contest the throne. Later, if a fiefdom is granted, she could go with me to become a dowager at the fief, something the princess's mother could never enjoy. After all, there are so many women in the palace. Surely, I couldn't be the only child forever. Well, in fact, my father really only had me. The consorts in his harem didn't harm me back then. Heaven help them, their intestines would have turned to regret. After that, his children came and went one after another, barely touching the ground. Seasons passed, but I alone remained standing. Was I unlucky? I enjoyed every luxury and honor. But if you say I enjoyed it, then I was truly cursed. It wasn't until I became the crown prince that my mother really panicked. But by then, there was no way back. If I were a princess pretending to be a prince, maybe there'd still be a chance. But a bastard child acting as crown prince? That's basically signing my death warrant. I only had 2 choices, pretend or die. My mother began strictly regulating my every word and gesture. Voice must be coarse, chest flat, skin not too fair, and avoid getting close to men. After long training, I felt I was doing quite well at pretending. But my mother still wasn't satisfied. When I asked what else I could improve, she paused and said, "This really can't be changed. You just lack fatherly essence." To cultivate this fatherly essence, I decided to raise a small living being to experience the joy of being a father. Thus, I found Jiang Zhi on the street. At that time, no one knew she was from the Jiang family, not even she knew. Back then, she was called Tao Zhi. I always felt that name suited her best. She was like a peach, soft and pink, fulfilling my imagination of a girl. When my mother forbade her to wear women's clothing, I let her wear it. When my mother forbade jewelry, I let her wear it. She was every beautiful projection I couldn't attain, another version of myself I could raise anew. But this girl was truly difficult to raise. She'd stumble even at a drop of rain from the eaves. Only then did I realize how hard it was to be a father. Compared to raising Jiang Zhi, my old man, Xuan Yun's father, had been way too easy to please over the years. I finally managed to raise the sickly Jiang Zhi into a lively and radiant young lady, and the Jiang family came to claim her. Those cursed human traffickers. They insisted she was their daughter, and it turned out she actually was. Not happy about it, But soon I was glad she returned to the Jiang family. The old man was sick, and his brothers were restless. Had I been a real crown prince, I would have had the confidence to deal with them. But I wasn't. I carried two natural triggers. If either were seized, they could tear me apart. Jiang Zhi jumped in under these circumstances, insisting on protecting me. I told her, "Then go win Pei Jun." I had noticed the way her eyes lit up when looking at Pei Jun. Jiang Zhi wasn't sophisticated. She cared a lot about appearances and was easy to trick. I must admit, I bore half the responsibility. Although her age didn't quite match, I genuinely raised her as a daughter, albeit a little spoiled. Luckily, Pei Jun, both in looks and character, was barely acceptable, just good enough for Jiang Zhi. If she could successfully win Pei Jun, she'd have someone to protect her. If not, at least she'd have something to occupy herself with, keeping her away from me, avoiding collateral damage. By then, I had prepared for the worst. I didn't anticipate that the old man's life was so stubborn he survived. Nor did I expect him to be shameless enough to dump this mess on me and declare himself Emperor Emeritus. The poisoning incident truly caught me off guard. I even imagined they'd poison me directly, never thinking it would be this ridiculous. To protect my secret, Jiang Zhi entered the palace as my consort. On one hand, it was to safeguard her reputation after the scandal spread. On the other, no one else was more suitable. Jiang Zhi told me, luckily she hadn't fallen for Pei Jun yet. At that time, I didn't realize she was lying, or maybe even she didn't realize. Over 3 years, I gradually settled into my position. My father suddenly realized something was off about my identity. I wasn't afraid. I was just relieved it was him who discovered it. No matter who else threatened me, it would have been far worse. My mother, one of the few survivors from the harem, was exceptionally capable. She successfully convinced my father that her child had been swapped intentionally, rather than betraying him. The old man was soft-hearted. Even knowing I wasn't his biological child, he couldn't bring himself to harm me. He just liked scheming occasionally. He found Jiang Zhi and told her to bear a child for his illegitimate son. Wait, what? The old man actually had an illegitimate son? From an emperor's perspective, sending your consort to bear a child for your general? That's chaos of epic proportions. 9 generations wouldn't be enough. But from my perspective, one is my daughter, the other is my chosen son-in-law. The old man actually had an eye for talent and finally did something right. I lied to Jiang Zhi, saying I needed a child of her and Pei Jun. Everything went as I expected. My daughter was eventually taken by her husband. I gave her a dowry of enough wealth and a token. If Pei Jun ever treated her poorly, or if she simply changed her mind, I wanted her to have the courage to leave at any moment. She was my carefully raised daughter, my sister in hardship, my comrade entrusted with life, my friend through life and death. another version of myself in this world. I only wished she wouldn't be trapped in this deep palace her whole life, hoping she would find someone she loved and who loved her enough to spend her life with. She didn't have to rely on any man. 5 years after Jiang Zhi was taken by Pei Jun, I found a boy I liked enough, made him consort, and for appearances, called him the Empress's substitute. His looks and personality were secondary. The key was that he was easy to manage and control. Even knowing my secret, he could never threaten me. After all, my goal was a heart with no men, not a space without men. Unlike my mother, I learned my lesson. Before entering the palace, a male consort must take sterilization medicine. A child would fuel ambitions that shouldn't exist. More importantly, I would not allow anyone to threaten Xuyang's place. Xuyang was the daughter of the emperor and consort, and would be my only child, the undisputed heir. I still remember her at birth, small, soft, utterly adorable. If Jiang Zhi was my spiritual anchor, Xuyang was my life's continuation. The world always compares men to the sun, women to the moon. For my Xuyang, I had to work harder so that a woman could be a sun herself, shining her own light, composing her own chapter. The end.